we have no time for prattle.
No time at all,
No.
because we're doing a deep dive today.
Yes. So I say we just dive on in.
I think we have to. Hello, everyone. I'm Charlotte.
And I'm Dina. Welcome to the Grim Curriculum.
So today we're doing something a little bit different. We've kind of done this format of episode in the past with our Wade Wilson episode, except that time Dina had all the info.
Yes.
And I was learning along as we went. This time we're covering a case that's literally unraveling before us in court, still unraveling as of today. And I'm going to talk about it, and Dina's going to learn about it.
Yeah, we're taking a little bit of a break from Robert Pickton just so I can get some more of my research down and all of that good stuff. And Charlotte's been kind of talking to me about this on the side.
Yes.
We were going to do this on extra credit, and I saw the notes and I was like, dude, like,
this is a whole episode. And even since last week when I was going to cover it on extra credit, we're another week into the trial. And dude, the episode has doubled. So,
oh God, yeah.
Yeah, we're just going to get right into it. For those of you who haven't guessed or haven't seen, this is going to be about the Lindsay Clancy trial.
Yeah, so like we said, Charlotte's role today is information.
Yes.
I have kind of stayed away from this on purpose because I want to learn as we go. I know a little bit, so I'm going to be here asking questions.
Yes, chime in anytime. There is a lot of internet speculation about this. That's how it initially came to my knowledge. I had not heard of this case when it initially happened back in 2023, so just a few years ago. But yeah, holy cow, do I know about it now.
All right,
so let's
go.
Get into it. So,
oh, and before we do,
yes,
we're going to address this.
Okay.
This is very controversial subject matter.
It is. And so definitely keep that in mind. The trial is still ongoing. Information is literally coming out minute by minute. Right before I was driving over to Dina's to record, I was like, what are the new updates? So I have it up to, as of 2 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time today, we are up to date. But the court trial is still ongoing as we're recording.
Yeah,
so.
And I mean, this is upsetting. I mean, everything we talk about is upsetting, but when children are involved, it is even more so. We know a lot of people are very rightfully upset about this.
Yeah, who wouldn't be?
Exactly. So there's going to be a lot of opinions, and we do want to hear from you guys. So feel free to email us, thegrimcurriculum@gmail.com.
Yes.
Chime in on social media. Let us know your thoughts, because I mean, I'm very curious to see what everyone thinks about this, including you, obviously.
Yes.
So yeah.
I think the way I'm going to do it today, we're going to talk about all the info first, and of course, chime in anytime. I definitely have some big thoughts about this. So towards the end, I've been telling Dina we're going to put on our speculation hats at some point. So if you're here for that sort of thing, just wait. We'll get the details down first. Then we can speculate all day long.
We should have actual speculation hats.
We should.
Made.
I actually thought about that. Well, maybe we need to.
Yes.
Speculation. Anyway, okay. First things first, Lindsay Clancy is charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Cora, Dawson, and Callan, her children. She has pleaded not guilty, and the defense acknowledges that she did kill the children. The legal issue is whether she was criminally responsible for those acts given her mental state at the time. So just to make this very clear, because there's a lot of confusion about this, I think, and it gets people off on the wrong direction, she herself thinks that she killed her children. That is not what we are disputing today. We're disputing whether her mental state at the time makes her criminally responsible.
So it's very Andrea Yates.
Very much. And her name comes up.
Okay.
So, yeah. And for a very good reason. Lindsay, if convicted of murder, she faces life in prison without parole. If she is found not criminally responsible by reason of mental illness, she would then be committed to a state psychiatric facility rather than just simply being released. So she's not going to be wandering free even after this. Even if she is found not mentally responsible, she would end up in a psychiatric facility.
First question.
Yes.
If she is found not guilty and she is sent to the hospital, would that be for life as well?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes. The defense is arguing that Clancy was suffering from bipolar disorder with postpartum psychosis, compounded by severe sleep deprivation and problems with her psychiatric treatment and medications.
Okay.
The initial incident. On January 24th, 2023, Clancy took Cora to a pediatrician appointment. Her other kids played in the snow, and she communicated very normally with her family over text. Later, her husband Patrick left the house to pick up some food and medication for the kids. Prosecutors argue that this was Lindsay's deliberate planning because it created a period in which she would be alone at home with the children, with Patrick out of the house. The defense disputes this interpretation. Clancy then strangled her children with exercise bands before cutting her own neck and wrists and jumping from a second-story window. Patrick then returned home, discovered Clancy on the front lawn, then the children, called 911. Clancy survived the fall and is now paralyzed from the waist down.
Mm-hmm.
So she is in a wheelchair, and you do see this in the trial videos as well. So the details about that, because you're probably thinking, oh, there's some stuff missing there.
Mm-hmm.
So to get into it a little bit more, the initial 911 call came in from Patrick at approximately 6:11 p.m. from the Clancy family home at 47 Summer Street in Duxbury, Massachusetts, and initially reported as a possible suicide attempt. So Patrick comes home, sees his wife bleeding from the neck and wrists, crashed out on the front lawn, immediately calls 911 and is like, my wife has tried to kill herself.
So I saw a video about this where that call was not actually placed immediately because he said he didn't have Wi-Fi.
Yes, I have also heard this. Speculation hat on, very briefly. We're having a little aside here. There is a lot of stuff I personally think does not add up about this initial incident.
Yes, because I also saw that her body temperature was very low.
This is a huge thing. So when on that January day in Massachusetts, it was a very cold day, and obviously after Lindsay had left the house through the second floor window, landed on the front lawn, it was very cold, and her body temperature was extremely low. I think the actual number is 82 degrees.
Yes.
They're thinking she was approximately outside for about half an hour. And again, don't quote me on this. You can look up the actual reportings, but approximately half an hour. A lot of the professional folks, medical professionals on the internet are saying that is an extremely low temperature given that situation.
Yeah.
There are folks that have been frozen in lakes and been physically dead and brought back to life whose temperatures were not that low. So there's a little bit of suspicion around that. I don't really know.
Okay.
But yeah, it's definitely a talking point for sure. So Lindsay was found outside. Patrick called 911. Police and fire responded to the house. Officers initially focused on Lindsay, who was outside and injured.
Mm-hmm.
This is also a point of contention because a lot of people on the internet are like, why wouldn't they just go into the house? Patrick apparently had not indicated there was anything wrong with the children at this point. The police and fire thought they were responding to an alleged suicide attempt. Patrick then went into the house to check on the children. According to the search warrant affidavit, dispatch then advised responding officers that Patrick was in the basement and something was wrong because the children wouldn't wake up. Officers heard Patrick screaming, went into the basement where they found all three children.
Can we go over the ages of the kids?
Cora is the 5-year-old, Dawson is 3 years old, and Callan was the youngest at 8 months old.
Okay.
So he was just a baby. Prosecution has increasingly emphasized the argument that the suicide attempt itself may have been staged or at least less serious than it appeared, pointing to the nature of Lindsay's injuries and the circumstances surrounding the fall. This has become a significant theme for the prosecution during all the medical testimony.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there's a lot of experts in this case from all different sort of aspects of the medical community. We have psychiatrists and psychologists. We have nurses and doctors.
And Lindsay herself was a nurse.
Exactly. Okay. Which again brings in a lot of questions later for your speculation
yes.
hat part. So yes, whether or not she sort of staged her own suicide or what was going on there, the defense obviously argues that no, this was a genuine attempt at ending her life. The current trial is taking place at Plymouth Superior Court in Plymouth, Massachusetts, also in Plymouth County. For some reason, quite a few articles that I was reading made it very clear that Plymouth, Massachusetts and Plymouth County are two different things. I'm not sure that it's actually relevant to what I'm going to tell you today.
Okay.
It just seemed to come up a lot. So for those of you who are from the area, if it's very relevant, by all means, chime in. The jury was even taken to the home after to have a view of the property. So they were literally given the opportunity to walk around, understand the layout of the home and kind of the timeline of what happened when police showed up, et cetera, et cetera. However, the house has changed ownership since then, and it's undergone some changes, which they had to mention to the jury that things weren't exactly the same. Starting with the big players here, I feel like not often do we talk about the actual legal teams, just because trials can be a really long, drawn-out thing. But the characters, I should say, that are the attorneys in this case, it would be remiss not to talk about them because they have a lot of history and they're, again, just very strong characters. So we start with defense's Kevin J. Reddington. Reddington is a very experienced Massachusetts criminal defense attorney with approximately 50 years in practice.
Dang.
Yeah, he's been in it. He's been involved in a long list of high-profile and extremely difficult cases. He's been practicing since 1975 and has handled more than 100 murder cases. He's also a member of the American College of Trial Lawyers, which apparently is a very selective organization.
Oh.
So he's the bee's knees, apparently. He's pretty famous for using demonstrations and unusual physical evidence in his previous trials. For those of you who are following along with the case, there is a part where he's cross-examining, I believe it's actually Lindsay's mom, about some text messages that went back and forth between Lindsay and her mom. And Lindsay's mother is trying to kind of pull them back up on her phone to reference them in her testimony. And the judge says, do you think we can get her a print off or something so it's a little easier to read? And Reddington pulls out this poster board with the text messages printed off. And he goes, oh yeah, we can do that.
Oh, wow.
So he's very dramatic, I'll say. He definitely uses certain tactics to drive his points home. The notable cases that he has covered have been Therese Rogers back in 1989. Reddington successfully defended Rogers after she murdered her abusive boyfriend. He argued then temporary insanity. He's also represented Dr. Anne-Marie Gerbowski. She shot her abusive husband. Reddington argued self-defense, and prosecutors ultimately did not charge her.
Oh, wow.
He's also covered the controversial Reverend Ronald Paquin. So he was the Catholic priest who was the first priest to plead guilty in the Boston area Catholic sexual abuse scandal. So very, very difficult and high-profile controversial cases. So this is not his first rodeo, as they say.
Expensive.
I believe, now, again, I don't know how true this is. I did read somewhere he's $1,800 an hour.
Oh.
I also read, but again, don't quote me on this, that he is taking Lindsay's case pro bono.
Oh.
This is not confirmed. Do your own research on this matter, but this is what I have seen.
Okay.
He's been very aggressive about the prosecution's decision to charge 3 counts of first-degree murder. He argues that this is fundamentally a case about severe mental illness rather than a calculated, planned murder case.
Okay.
He's very comfortable being somewhat confrontational, I have noticed. He's not afraid to get in there and ask the hard questions. But he's also very hard on his own witnesses as well, giving testimony, because I think from his perspective, he's going to make sure that they are infallible.
Yeah.
Right? So you're going to be, in his perspective, harder on your own witnesses because you don't want the prosecution asking them the same questions.
That's valid.
Right? And it also, I think from a strategic lawyer point of view, you ingratiate yourself to the jury, which is very important. Reddington's job isn't to decide whether or not Lindsay's actions were horrific, because of course they were. His job is to challenge whether the Commonwealth can prove the element of charged offense, every element of the charged offense, including criminal responsibility. And just as a quick point, this was the thing that amused me. During one cross-examination, a state police investigator addressed him as sir, and Reddington immediately replied, "Oh, you don't have to call me sir."
Okay.
So that's kind of the personality that's going on there. So on the prosecution team, we have Jennifer Sprague. She's identified as the lead prosecutor in the Clancy case, representing the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office. She's been heavily involved in presenting the prosecution's case, including questioning witnesses and handling much of the evidentiary presentation. She's been with the Plymouth County DA's office since 2003. She's reportedly participated in 28 homicide trials, along with over 40 superior court cases involving things like sexual assault, firearms, narcotics, and domestic violence. All that to say, she's a very experienced homicide prosecutor, which, for those listening, we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Then we have Shannon Buckingham. She's another major prosecutor on the case. She delivered the opening statement, and she's been a pretty prominent presence, obviously, in the courtroom as well. Their stance is Lindsay was mentally unwell, but she was not psychotic, and that she deliberately killed her children, that she was aware and planned what she did. Buckingham joined the Plymouth County DA's office in 2011 and serves as its chief of the Family Protection Unit. So they're very specialized in what they're doing, if that makes sense. Her background is pretty relevant, given that this unit handles cases involving vulnerable victims and family violence. There's another little neat detail that has been mentioned a lot, and I noticed this too. Buckingham is the prosecutor who is the one that's worn bows in her hair, because Cora, the oldest child, had a love of really big bows. And so she has, people have different thoughts about this, but she herself has sort of said this is in solidarity kind of thing. My aside is a lot of people think that she's kind of trying to play into the emotional aspect of it, but I would argue this is a very emotional case. So, there's food for thought there. Both of those ladies work for DA Timothy Cruz. He's the Plymouth County District Attorney. It's his office prosecuting the case. They're working out of that office. He's a very tough, aggressive prosecutor, and he's been with the DA office for approximately 25 years. The Boston Globe recently characterized his office as having a quote-unquote no-holds-barred approach to prosecution. They are famous for basically going for the highest possible sentencing they can and not taking deals and going the full way with it kind of thing. They are known for being pretty relentless when it comes to their prosecution. So a little bit about the internet discourse on the attorneys. There's a lot of people online that really like Reddington. There's a lot of people that really don't like him. I haven't seen too many people who say they like the prosecutors. I have seen many people saying they do not like the prosecutors, which sucks for them, because if the jury also doesn't like the prosecutors, that can really affect the outcome of a case. If the jury feels like they're being too aggressive, or they flip over from being hard on the defense to bullying the defense, it's a very fine line. It shouldn't matter in court cases. It should all be facts are facts are facts.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is we're all human beings.
Yeah, it's human nature.
You're gonna have it. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people are saying that the defense is manipulative. Others say that the prosecution is unnecessarily aggressive. I've mentioned the bow thing. There's a lot of people having opinions about these lawyers online. Some people think certain attorneys are behaving badly. So that is its own drama. But I think to be an attorney, you kind of have to have a particular personality. And I think when you have a lot of these personalities, coming together in a clash, of course you're going to see the sparks fly. I think that's inevitable. Ultimately, neither side here is there to give us the objective truth. At the end of the day, the jury is, which will come later. Okay, so into the details. Let's start with Lindsay's mental health history. So as the case has gone on, the trial has gone on, I would say the mental health part of it has become a much stronger battering ram for the defense. Like, it's really going for Lindsay here. We know about Lindsay's anxiety, depression, insomnia, intrusive thoughts, suicidal thoughts, obviously. There are a lot of fears surrounding her ability to parent. There were medication concerns. Apparently, at one point, she had something like 13 different psychotic or antipsychotic medications.
Yeah, I read that list. From a lot of different doctors.
From a lot of different doctors. She made repeated attempts to seek treatment. She sought it out a lot. I think, and perhaps this is going to be a little bit of hyperbole here, I don't mean to exaggerate, but I think she was begging for help.
And I think a lot of the time with even in the Canadian healthcare system, you have to, because your doctors are so overworked, they're so busy, they're often not calling you to get you help. You have to take those steps yourself, and you have to fight for yourself, essentially.
And we see a lot of the different doctors that she did see on the stand giving their witness testimony as well. And so there are some that perhaps would come off a lot more in support of her, or at least their testimony comes off in a lot more support of her. And there are some that disagree completely. So this, I think, has become a battle of almost expert versus expert here, which you'll see kind of as we talk about the witnesses. Lindsay told people that she was afraid she might hurt her children. She told multiple people, including her mom, her sister, Susan Clancy, who is Patrick, her husband's mother. She testified that Lindsay was essentially, again, begging for help and was becoming increasingly paranoid and frightened. For me, the fact that Patrick's mom as well, you can see this yourself, there's a part where as she walks away after giving her witness testimony, she gives Lindsay a nod. And it's almost, I mean, it's hard to interpret. Again, probably the only person that knows that is Susan Clancy.
Yeah.
But it's almost a nod of like solidarity, because at the end of the day, she lost her grandkids too.
Yeah.
Right? And she amazingly has a lot of compassion on the stand, which it's kind of surprising to see from the grandmother-in-law, if that makes sense, right?
Absolutely.
Many people close to Lindsay said the deterioration in her status was very visible before the killings happened. So again, people definitely noticed what was happening. On to the medication. Rebecca Gelada, who was the psychiatric nurse practitioner who treated Lindsay in the beginning of November of 2022, so just a couple of months before it happened, she testified that Lindsay repeatedly complained that her medications weren't helping quickly enough, and she feared that some of her medications were actually making things worse. Gelada also testified she believed Lindsay had bipolar disorder, although Patrick immediately disagreed with that assessment. She testified that they had come in together to see her, and she was saying, look, I think this is a very high probability that bipolar disorder is an issue here. And she testified that Patrick said, my wife does not have bipolar disorder.
Interesting.
Again, that's one of those things that keeps coming up.
Okay.
Yeah. The defense is basically building this picture, from what I can see. Lindsay is becoming increasingly unwell. She repeatedly sought treatments. She received multiple psychiatric medications. She continued to deteriorate. She became increasingly paranoid and suicidal, and eventually experienced psychotic symptoms. The prosecution's response is essentially, yeah, she was certainly struggling, but the evidence doesn't establish that she was psychotic or incapable of understanding what she was doing. So that's, again, the big back and forth. There's been a lot of speculation around some search history done on phones. There is an Apple Watch and also the family laptop, or at least Patrick's laptop. So on January 20th, 4 days before the killings, there was a web search on Lindsay's phone that said, can you treat a sociopath? I want to point out, just because a search was made on her phone does not necessarily mean she made that search.
Okay.
Keep in mind, that's the tough thing with digital
Yep.
evidence, is that yes, it is evidence, of course, and it can really help build a picture of what happened. And certainly on the day of the killings, it helps establish somewhat of a timeline, which is very important. But anyway, amongst the searches that were discussed in court, again, on the phones and laptops, there were other topics involving hallucinations, postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, schizophrenia, psychiatric medications, suicide, methods of dying, and then after all of that was the January 20th sociopath search.
Wow.
So clearly someone in the house has some concerns, depending on who made those searches. Investigators also testified about searches concerning how to slit one's own throat to die and where the carotid artery is located. You made a point that Lindsay herself was a nurse. A nurse would know where the carotid artery is. Just putting that out there. Food for thought.
I know where it is.
Exactly. Just food for thought.
Okay.
There was also evidence of a visit to a Suicide Methods website in August of 2022, although importantly, investigators testified that this occurred after a search for the musician Tom T. Hall, and it led the user to that page. I believe I have seen places that Tom T. Hall was an artist that Patrick was fond of, and he had died, I believe, by suicide.
Okay.
So that could be just neither here nor there.
I mean, that's how search rabbit holes go. You start off looking at pictures of cats and you end up God knows where. Like, we've all been there.
So again, it's pointed out that it is a little odd given all the other searches.
Yeah, for sure.
But not necessarily. Keep in mind, as I mentioned, just because the searches came from Lindsay's phone or Patrick's laptop does not necessarily mean that either one of those people made those searches, right? Investigators read a diary-like note from Lindsay's phone written less than 3 months before the killings. It described her sadness and depression over being unable to parent her third child in the same way she had parented the older children. This is very useful because it's one of the pieces of evidence that doesn't really help either side, but unlike the other web searches, it's highly likely that was Lindsay saying that. Do you know what I mean?
And are they taking that based off of just the cadence of it, or how are they saying that they know that was her?
Just assuming that it's because it's in the notes on her phone.
Okay.
Rather than just a Google search.
Okay.
The prosecution can point it to evidence of her distress surrounding the youngest kid, but the defense can say, look, she was clearly significantly deteriorating. So it could, it can help either side there. We then get to the family testimony. I mentioned that Patrick's mom had testified, but so had Lindsay's mom. That's Paula Musgrove. She testified she had seen a significant deterioration in her daughter. She described anxiety, paranoia, insomnia, suicidal thoughts, disturbing thoughts about harming the children, concerns about her medication, and Lindsay repeatedly stating that she needed help. Her mom also testified about Lindsay's fear that the medication was damaging her mind and making things much worse. Her mom said that Lindsay had told both her and Patrick of having these thoughts of harming the children.
Okay.
So at this point, again, in my personal opinion, there is no disputing that everyone knew this poor woman was fucking unwell.
Yeah.
Right? Like, everyone is saying it. We have it now from medical professionals. We have it from people in her life. We have it from people who she worked with. So that is, I don't think, that's tough for the prosecution because they're saying, no, she was mentally unwell, but not psychotic enough to not know what she was doing.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing a woman who is very much under a mountain of things that are going to break her.
Yeah.
I don't know. We then have Alison Ozga, who is Lindsay's sister. She testified as well about Lindsay's declining mental health. Alison is a social worker. And one uncomfortable moment for the defense was that she acknowledged she did not report her concerns as a mandated reporter.
Oh.
So that's really for the defense.
And let's explain what that is for people who don't know, because that is very important.
Absolutely. So mandated reporters can be social workers, obviously, teachers, medical professionals, hospital staff, that kind of thing, that when basically they see something, they're obligated to say something.
You have to.
That is the law.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, obviously, when it comes to children. That's why teachers are mandated. You know, just as an example, if a kid comes in with bruises, they have to bring it up. They can't just ignore that. Those kinds of things. And it's the same thing for anybody, whether it be a grown adult, a man, a woman, a child, or perhaps even senior citizens as well, right? Anybody that could be potentially vulnerable, essentially. The defense is using the family's observations to demonstrate how serious Lindsay's condition had become. But again, the prosecution pointed to the fact that even the closest people to her perhaps didn't believe that she was about to kill her children. Because they're saying, well, if you really believe that she was going to hurt her kids, why didn't you say anything?
That's valid too.
Right? I think that is a very valid point. So again, just to push that point home again, the prosecution is trying to prove that she knew what she was doing. And if the people around her didn't think she was crazy enough to just snap and not know that she had killed her kids, then why didn't they say anything?
Mm-hmm.
We chatted very briefly about Susan Clancy, Patrick's mom. Her testimony was quite emotional. She described herself, Lindsay, as a loving and nurturing mother, and said Lindsay was also begging for help. She described Lindsay's fear about her medication and deteriorating mental health. She testified that Lindsay believed people could hear her thoughts, which was important because it begins to connect the earlier depression, anxiety to psychosis. You're hearing things now.
Yes, absolutely. It's escalating.
Exactly. There was a really odd courtroom moment that this was the part that had my jaw dropped when I said. And again, I don't know what the prosecution was trying to do with this, but when Susan was being cross-examined by the prosecution asked Susan about her Catholic beliefs. And she said, you're a practicing Catholic? And Susan goes, yes, I am. And then the prosecution goes, do you know that murder is a mortal sin? The judge immediately shuts that down.
God.
And it was just like, what do you mean by that, ma'am? Like it was so bizarre. And Susan Clancy just kind of sits there like with this look on her face, like she just can't believe that she was asked that, because who would?
And there's no point in asking that question. To me, anyways, that's not relevant. I mean, to anything.
They were a practicing Catholic family. They're a Catholic and Christian family. They do have a family priest that they did call in a lot for help with Lindsay, especially after everything. But I think, personal opinion, again, maybe lawyers and different folks out there might have different opinions. I think that was really irrelevant. Like, I'm not sure why that was asked.
Yeah. I completely agree with you.
More recently now, we've had the family witnesses that testified about Lindsay's mental state. Now we have the professional witnesses. So the big defense witness was Dr. Paul Zeisel. He's a forensic psychologist. He has met with Lindsay more than 60 times since the killings. His testimony was extremely significant because he gave the jury an actual expert opinion on the big question of whether or not Lindsay was fully aware of what she was doing. His conclusion is that Lindsay has bipolar disorder with postpartum psychosis and is not criminally responsible. That's his opinion. He testified that she had experienced psychotic symptoms, became paranoid, believed people could hear her thoughts, experienced severe intrusive thoughts, experienced auditory hallucinations of voices telling her to do things, and ultimately was unable to appreciate the wrongfulness of her actions. He specifically testified, and I quote, had no appreciation for the wrongfulness. That was the words right out of his mouth. And that she was unable to conform her behavior to the law. This is so far, I think, the strongest direct evidence that the defense has presented. And he also testified that shortly after the killings, Lindsay told him that she had heard a male voice ordering her to kill the children and then herself. According to his testimony, this voice told Lindsay she had no choice. He said Lindsay described the voice as telling her that she and her children wouldn't be safe unless she followed its command. So this is very important because he's saying there's no way that she could have been responsible. She was clearly off her rocker.
Yeah.
Prosecutors are saying that this was Lindsay's reported account relayed through a witness. At the time that Dr. Zeisel says that Lindsay told him this, there is no documented report to back this up.
Why?
Not sure. You'd think that would be a pretty significant thing to write down about a patient that is in her position.
That's very bizarre.
Exactly. The prosecution is hammering this point home. Zeisel acknowledged that Lindsay's medical records do not contain a contemporaneous report of a voice telling her to kill herself or the children. They just document her suicidal thoughts, but not that the specific hallucination commanded her. And for those of you listening, I looked up contemporaneous because I didn't know what it meant either. They use it a lot in court, apparently. It just means existing or occurring in the same period of time. So when he says her medical records do not contain a contemporaneous report of a voice, blah, 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 he's saying that they might have written it down 3 years after the fact, but it wasn't happening at the time that she told him. The defense's other psychiatric expert is Dr. Donald Condy. He testified for the defense and reviewed Lindsay's psychiatric treatment and history. His testimony supported the defense's broader argument concerning her mental illness and treatment. So essentially, he agreed with Dr. Zeisel. Before I go on a little bit further about the mental health aspect, because they did talk a lot more about that today with some more witnesses that they brought up, I want to talk quickly about a little bit more of the digital evidence around the Apple Watch, because that comes up quite a lot when people are talking about it. The Apple Watch was Lindsay's. It was recovered as part of the investigation, and digital evidence from her phone and other devices, obviously a big part of the case. The watch, there's certain text messages that were sent from the Apple Watch when Lindsay was already on the front lawn, not wearing the watch. So there's some really suspicious stuff about that.
Oh.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
There's certain things as well about how, I mean, I think you have an Apple Watch, right?
I do.
So it tracks certain fitness aspects if you'd like it. There was a couple of things where they were tracking, obviously, her heart rate and was saying at the time, and again, this is just food for thought, at the time that she was murdering the children, the heart rate on her Apple Watch didn't go above like 60.
That's very strange.
Yeah.
Mine is higher than that when I'm sitting on the couch doing nothing.
I think mine's higher than that when I pass the fuck out.
Yeah.
So that as well.
That's very
with
low.
The combined body temperature. There's a few things about when Patrick left to go get medication and food about his timeline. I will get into it a little bit as well. But yeah, the Apple Watch is worth mentioning. Back to the medical evidence. This time instead about her suicide attempt, a defense forensic pathologist, Dr. Elizabeth Laposada, testified about her injuries from the fall, Lindsay's injuries from the fall. The prosecution challenged her interpretation basically because she had surprisingly little visible head trauma despite falling roughly 13 feet head first onto frozen ground. So that's also a little odd as well.
Yeah.
The prosecution is using that to question aspects of the defense's interpretation of the suicide attempt. They're saying that if she went out first to essentially nosedive in, she would have hit head top first, but she didn't. I don't know if there's more to that, but again, it's something that keeps coming up. But all these little things are kind of... they're not irrelevant to me or the internet, but they're irrelevant to this case because we're not disputing whether or not Lindsay did it. everyone is saying
Yeah,
she did,
exactly.
including herself. So we can talk about whether or not this suicide attempt was staged. Some people think that Lindsay obviously staged it. Some people are saying that maybe someone else staged
Yeah,
it.
because I mean, again, nurse.
Yep.
She has this plethora of medication.
Yep.
She would have, if she deliberately wanted to end her own life, she knows how to do it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely she does. And not to mention, not only did she apparently fling herself from a second-story window, she also had huge cuts on her wrists and neck. I'm not saying you couldn't cut your own throat in an attempt to kill yourself. I'm just saying it's not likely, and not in the manner that she did it. There's a lot of things, again, suspicious about how do you cut your own throat? You know, are you going, if you're right-handed, you would go right to left. You know, like all these little things. And again, you're exactly right. She's a nurse. If she wanted to slash her wrists to die, she likely would have done a better job at it.
Yeah, because there's something that I saw very briefly, and we're going to get graphic here. I apologize. The cuts on the wrists were horizontal.
Yes, and anyone that knows if you're going to slash your wrists, and again, please don't do this, you guys. You go up the wrist, not across the wrist. And that was not the case for Lindsay. However, you could argue she is not mentally well.
Exactly.
And so perhaps this is manic and crazy behavior, right? We're not talking about someone that was in the right state of mind, clearly.
Yeah.
So while you or I would sit and try and wrap your head around, well, why would I wouldn't do that, but it's like, we're not in that state.
Exactly.
So who could say?
You can't predict the actions of someone who is that unwell.
Absolutely. And I think we can all agree she was very unwell. I wanted to mention as well, so previously, Lindsay had been treated at McLean Hospital. If you guys have seen Girl Interrupted, that is the hospital from that book.
What?
Yeah. It's based on a very real hospital.
Okay, and I do have a question.
Yes.
So we're looking at something that happened in 2023. It's now 2026.
Yes.
Has she been in a jail, or has she been in an institution, like a mental institution?
I believe a little bit of both.
Okay.
I do know as well that she is never unsupervised, and this is because she is very much still a suicide risk.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
There is someone with her at all times. When she is in the hospital, she has plainclothes officers outside of the door. You walking past the hospital room probably wouldn't even notice them. You know, they're not there, again, plainclothes. They're not there in their full uniform and everything. She is always got eyes on her at all times.
Which
obviously, yes. But about the McLean Hospital, there was a witness that came forward that the defense had brought forward who, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, didn't get to testify. This was a big thing for TikTok because this is how this witness came about. So Emily Thorndike is a former McLean Hospital employee, and she's a licensed clinical social worker.
Okay.
She had publicly criticized the hospital's treatment of Lindsay and discussed the case on TikTok as it was happening. The judge allowed her to be questioned outside of the jury's presence, but ultimately ruled that she could not testify before the jury because she had left McLean Hospital before Lindsay was admitted. So her direct knowledge of Lindsay's actual treatment would have been very limited. She's just saying, in the past, McLean Hospital has a reputation.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then Lindsay was admitted. Blah, 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 blah. Here we are today. So the judge said, nah, you know what? You have some interesting points, but it's not enough that we're going to have you testify.
I think that makes sense, though.
I think so, too. But I will say the judge did allow certain hospital staffing records to be introduced instead.
Okay.
So we'll take what we can get there. I mentioned that the Clancy family was quite Catholic. And on Thursday, August 20th, hospital chaplain Sheila Kavanagh testified that she met with Lindsay more than 200 times following the killings. Kavanagh testified that Lindsay expressed relief that her children were safe. She also testified that Lindsay told her about a persistent voice that had commanded her actions. According to Kavanaugh, Lindsay believed that she had saved her children. The chaplain told her that the children were safe in heaven. It's important because it's another witness independently describing Lindsay talking about this alleged voice.
Yeah.
But the prosecution pointed out that the voice claim was not documented in her original notes.
Oh my God.
So, again, neither here nor there. This brings us all today. And guys, we still have so much information to go through. It's crazy. So as of today, defense is essentially through the finish line.
And today is August 21st that we are recording.
Yes.
Yes.
Today is day 18 of the testimony. Now, bear with me because I was literally updating this before we came to record. So let me just make sure. I might have to go back a little bit back and forth. So today, the defense called Dr. Philip Resnick. He is a forensic psychiatrist. He is, I forget the word for it, but lawyers, I have heard, especially defense lawyers, you save your best witness for last.
Yeah, that makes sense.
To really drive the point home.
Because people, I mean, at the end of the day, the jury is human, and that's usually what they're going to remember.
100%. This has been a very long, drawn-out process. Resnick is particularly notable because he was a key expert in the Andrea Yates case.
There it is.
There it is.
And if you aren't familiar with the Andrea Yates case, we did cover it.
We did.
And immediately when I heard about this, even if it was just limited kind of headlines that I saw, that's who I thought of.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of people who are getting caught up in the Patrick Clancy of it all, and they keep comparing it to Chris Watts.
Interesting.
However, that's only if you think he did it, which is, again, pure conjecture, speculation.
Yeah.
Guys, I know there's a lot of sus stuff around it. We all have questions, but the fact is, as of right now, Patrick did not do it. That's the legal stance on it right now. And so I think it would be kind of unfair to compare him to Chris Watts, but the comparison to Andrea Yates, I think, is a little more appropriate.
Oh, absolutely.
Based on the fact that she was a mother that was ultimately found not guilty by reason of insanity of killing her 5 children. Resnick had testified in the case about Yates' severe postpartum psychosis, which is obviously relevant for the case we're talking about today. His testimony is obviously very significant to the defense's argument. However, as of the latest reporting from this morning, there were some technical problems that delayed his testimony via Zoom. So that's why I had to keep rechecking the updates. As of 12:50 p.m. today, the defense rested its case after calling final witness Dr. Resnick. Clancy did not testify herself. The defense ultimately altogether called 10 witnesses. They focused heavily on her psychiatric history and the postpartum psychosis.
And her not testifying, we talk about this a lot when we cover serial killers, where a lot of them will testify.
Yes.
And most legal experts will agree that that is a huge mistake.
Yes.
You do not testify at your own trial.
I cannot think off the top of my head of a single case where testifying at your own trial has ever been a good idea.
Yeah, and that might surprise some people, but that's just the fact of the matter.
Yeah.
You should never testify at your own trial.
Historically speaking, it has not gone well for the defendant. Resnick, he testified that Lindsay was, and I quote, frankly psychotic when she killed her children. His opinion was that she was experiencing postpartum psychosis along with bipolar II disorder, and that she believed she was protecting her children from something she perceived as an even greater danger. He described the killings as altruistic filicide, meaning that within her delusional belief system, she believed she was doing something beneficial for her children, that she was protecting them or keeping them safe from some kind of external force. And he does testify that Lindsay described a feeling like an external force taking over her body,
Mm-hmm.
essentially feeling like she was a puppet, and that she experienced this command hallucination telling her to kill the children and then herself. This was like, boom.
Mm-hmm.
But prosecution, obviously, they immediately pushed back. That's their job to do that.
Yeah.
Their first rebuttal witness was Dr. Avram Mack. He's a psychiatrist who completely disagrees with the defense's diagnosis.
Okay.
So again, this is where the expert versus expert situation comes in. He diagnosed Clancy with a major depressive order and anxiety rather than bipolar or disorder and postpartum psychosis. His testimony was essentially that there wasn't sufficient evidence of mania or psychosis at the time of the killings. He characterized her thinking as rational and connected to her actual circumstances rather than being delusional. So you have Dr. Resnick, she's frankly psychotic, and then you have Dr. Mack saying she was depressed.
Two very different things.
Two very different things. So then you have Reddington on the defense coming back even harder, and he cross-examined Mack. He challenged him about his qualifications, his methodology, and his independence. Mack acknowledged some important things. He said that he did not interview Lindsay's family. He didn't speak with other people who knew her personally. He was retained by the prosecution in 2025 to interview her and make his own opinions. He is being paid by the Commonwealth for his expert opinion on this case. Reddington also pointed out that Mack had not spoken with Lindsay's coworkers or others who may have provided additional context about her behavior. At this point, the prosecution is expected to call 2 more rebuttal witnesses after Mack. Judge William Sullivan has indicated that closing arguments could begin Monday or Tuesday, depending on how quickly their testimony wraps up, and then it's in the jury's hands.
I can't even begin to imagine the weight of that on the jury and how complicated it is. I was listening to some jury interviews from the Picton case to put it in kind of recent perspective for myself. And a lot of what they talked about was mental health support for people who serve on juries like this, because a lot of them are never the same. And I mean, especially in a case like this, you're looking at a horrific thing. For starters,
yes,
you're having to hear autopsy reports, things like that.
Exactly, and they have definitely been shown these things. They've been talked through. I mentioned, again, this is a really hard subject, but the children were strangled by ligature strangulation with exercise bands, the sort of the round ones with the handles on the end. What a brutal way to kill anybody, never mind a child. They've seen this. They've heard from experts, how many pounds of pressure does it take to crush someone's like just brutal things that you never want to think about any human being, never mind a child.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right. I don't know what the counseling will be for the jury when it comes to their mental health. Your average person, I mean, we're different. We Google odd and crazy and horrific things all the time, but your average person never even sees an image of a dead body. Never mind, most people are not searching that kind of thing out. And then to have to be the one that not only has to take in this information with your own senses, but then come to some kind of conclusion.
That's a big, big job.
Yeah. There's a lot of folks on the internet with big, big opinions, but you don't have the burden to make that decision at the end of the day. You are not one of those folks, lucky or unlucky, who have ended up on that jury, right?
I definitely say unlucky.
I mean, can you imagine getting that jury duty summons in the mail? Okay, so I literally titled this beat, "Whoa, that was so much info, my guy." So let's just go over a few things real quick. Again, pushing that point home, the trial isn't about, did Lindsay kill her children? The trial is about, is she criminally responsible? The prosecution says she planned it. She sent Patrick out of the house. She was searching for information. She organized her afternoon. The seemingly other ordinary activity she performed that day, she communicated very normally with Patrick and other family members. The prosecution says this is evidence that shows consciousness and planning. The defense says, no, she was profoundly mentally ill, pointing to months of deteriorating mental health, repeated attempts to get help, suicidal thoughts, intrusive thoughts, paranoia, the beliefs that others could hear her thoughts. One of the things was she got so paranoid at one point that she asked her mom to come stay, and would her mom drive them to school for the school drop off, because she did not trust herself to drive her kids to school drop off.
Oh my God.
And she was then more paranoid about the fact that if the other moms or teachers, parents at the school saw that she wasn't the one dropping them off, would they be judging her for that?
Yeah.
So then she was even spiraling about things like that. There was obviously the medication problems, the possible bipolar disorder, the postpartum psychosis, these command hallucinations, and the expert testimony that says she could not appreciate the wrongfulness of her actions. The fascinating thing I found is that some of the same evidence can support completely different interpretations.
Absolutely.
Right? Like I've mentioned, there's a few things that come up and it's like, well, that could be good for the defense or the prosecution. It's just a neutral statement, really.
Yeah.
But it's not going to help either way. There is so much evidence, in my opinion, that Lindsay was very, very unwell before January 24th, 2023. There is evidence that she could carry out normal, ordinary activities, but there's also evidence that she was not sleeping. And you know what I mean? Like, I think two things can be true at once.
And I mean, also when it comes to mental health, like, this is a very kind of general statement, but you're going to have good days and bad days. You're going to have good hours and bad hours depending on the severity of your illness.
Absolutely. And some of the testimony from the psychiatric nurses and the medical health professionals that helped her said over the times where she did seek help and stayed in the hospital for her health, for her mental health, ultimately she would end up leaving because she felt much better.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a common thing. You know, you're on medication.
Yes.
You start to feel better and suddenly you think, well, I don't need the medication anymore, when you actually do.
Totally. And remember, she has an 8-month-old plus 2 other kids.
Yeah.
She's not sleeping properly. They were saying that even after her, I believe it was her psychiatric nurse had prescribed her something to help her sleep, Lindsay said she took it and was still completely wide awake. And that led the psychiatric nurse to say, okay, something is really messed up because that should have knocked you on your ass. So, you know, she's not sleeping, she's spiraling out, and then she gets into a mental health facility, gets some sleep, has people taking care of her, gets balanced, gets on the right medication. Of course, you're going to feel a little better.
Exactly.
But then, you know, you end up back into the same cycle and it just deteriorates again. Okay, that is all Lindsay. But we have to talk about Patrick.
Yeah, this is kind of where I did my own little deep dive.
Yes, lots of people have been.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, ginormous speculation warning. Patrick Clancy is not on trial. There is no publicly established evidence that he participated in the deaths of his children. We are not suggesting that he did. But
and the thing is, if he did, that's terrible. And if he didn't, my God, that's terrible. You know what I mean?
Like, it doesn't make it better either way.
No, especially for him.
Absolutely. But if you've been following along, we have to address Patrick.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? We have to.
He's a player in this game.
Of course he is. Patrick's role in the story, I think, is very unusual because he is simultaneously a victim, a witness, and one of the last people known to have interacted with Lindsay before the killings. He was the person who left the house shortly before the killings. He returned to discover what had happened. He made the 911 call. He became prosecution's first witness, and now has essentially had every single aspect of his behavior before and after the incident picked apart very publicly.
And it's not looking good for him.
No.
Not in the sense that I'm saying I think he's guilty. I'm just saying this is a person who is coming across very, very, very poorly. And I think in cases like this, I'm going to compare it to Andrea Yates.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a situation like this, the spouse is always going to be looked at because the spouse is the one that's in there, in the house, with her, with the kids, and he's kind of the front line of it all.
Absolutely, he is. So, of course, the spotlight is going to be immediately on him. And in any case like this, the first person they look at is the spouse always.
Of course.
So, again, speculation hats strapped on for the next little while.
Mm-hmm.
Because the trial has established that Lindsay had communicated some very disturbing things to Patrick before the murders, her mom testified that both herself and Patrick knew that Lindsay was having thoughts about harming the kids. His testimony portrays a situation in which he was apparently trying to understand what was happening with his wife while not necessarily understanding the extent of the danger. I'm going to bring up her sister again.
Mm-hmm.
She was a clinical social worker who knew her sister was struggling, but also did not report it. Neither did Patrick. I'm not saying they're right by this because I don't think they are, but they both did not report what was going on.
Yeah, and I mean, there's reasons why someone wouldn't want to report it. And
Of course,
I get that. You don't want to bring that kind of spotlight onto your family. Maybe it's a pride thing. Maybe it's, oh, it's a family problem kind of thing.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, regardless of what your relationship with someone is, if you think that they are at risk of harming somebody, especially your kids, I really do think at that point the responsibility falls on you to act.
Oh my God, I can't I think of now my sister with my niece, and if I ever thought there was any potential of that baby child being in any danger,
Yeah.
I would not give a hoot whose feelings I was hurting.
Absolutely.
Right? I would be like, absolutely not. We can all have a laugh and a beer about this when this is over.
Yeah.
But right now, we got some problems to solve,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Patrick was very aware, apparently, that Lindsay was struggling. He knew at least about some of the disturbing thoughts she was having, but there were also, again, healthcare professionals involved who apparently didn't believe that she represented imminent danger. So, again, it's all this that the testimony that seems to come forward is very interesting and sheds light on the situation, but it's not really determining either way how this is going to go.
And it's all very confusing too, because I watched a part of his testimony where basically it was about a specific appointment. And he said, well, I wasn't there.
Right.
I didn't talk to this expert. I was not in the room. And when they interviewed that expert, she says he was right there with her.
Yeah. So again, contraindications in testimony. We've talked about before how eyewitness testimony can be unreliable.
Very.
But when you have someone saying, no, we were all in a room together having a discussion, and someone who was supposed to be in that room is saying, absolutely not, I wasn't there that day, that's a bit of a problem, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
The big questions people have is, when it comes to this case, outside of Patrick and inside of Patrick, is why was she primarily treated as a suicide patient? This one, I think, is pretty obvious to me. I'm not sure really why this was a question. The initial 911 call was about a woman who had apparently cut herself and jumped from a second-story window. So the responding officer's first priority is getting her medical attention. They're not concerned whether or not it's a suicide in that moment. They're concerned with, this is our patient.
Yes, absolutely.
This is what's happened. This is how we need to treat her. The problem from the hindsight perspective is that while they're treating her, there's a very serious crime scene inside the house that no one seems to know about.
Yeah.
That's when Patrick charges inside, discovers the children, screams.
Can I interject?
Yes, of course.
One thing I saw too that, and you can tell me whether this has been confirmed or denied. I read that this was part of the testimony, but I can't fully confirm that.
There's been a lot, so.
Yeah. The bands that she used.
Yes.
Didn't have her fingerprints on them?
Didn't have any of her DNA on them.
What?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, is like, this case right now is not about that, but how was this not brought up at the time.
It's so confusing because, like, if it had his and hers, okay, maybe, you know, they both use the equipment.
Exactly.
That makes sense. But if she was, like, the last person to use it, why is her DNA not on it? That to me either says she didn't use it, which that, again, that's not what this is about.
Yep.
Or someone cleaned it.
Exactly. I don't know how in the initial investigation and all this sort of stuff that it didn't come up. And perhaps there is solid answers, and I would love to hear them.
Yeah.
Because it's trying to put a puzzle together, but you're missing some of the pieces. Again, Patrick, to me, very suspicious. But this whole case is so fucking suspicious.
Well, so much. I mean, it's not, you read the headlines and you see it and you're like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
But this is why getting into trials is so complicated. You look at this and it just, there's so many little pieces that, like you said, it's like you're putting together a puzzle and you're missing pieces.
Yeah.
You're putting together IKEA furniture without the instructions.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, it's all so confusing.
Well, and I think as well, actually, you know what? I'm going to change the puzzle analogy a little bit here. I think it's more like putting the puzzle together and still having a handful of pieces. And you have the full picture in front of you. And there's this extra stuff over here. And you're like, but where does this fit? And to me, that's all this Patrick information. Where does this fit?
Yeah.
Because it exists and it's enough that people have noticed, and there's people out there digging far deeper than me, let me tell you.
Mm-hmm.
There's some folks out there that have become quite the private little investigators, I think, digging into this stuff. But that's, yeah, where do these little puzzle pieces belong? Because I don't see where they do. One of the big questions, actually going back to Patrick, is people are like, well, why wasn't he immediately treated as a suspect? Because like we said, most of the time, the spouse is immediately treated as a suspect.
And that's just fact.
Exactly. He's the only surviving parent, obviously. He was away from the house immediately before the deaths. From an outside perspective, of course, there's going to be scrutiny in any homicide investigation, but he was investigated. There's so many people are being like, again, why wasn't he investigated? He was, guys. I promise you he was. Yeah. The initial search warrant material shows investigators interviewing him that evening at the hospital. They documented his account of the day, his relationship with Lindsay, her mental health history, and his movements.
How was their marriage?
I think it's tough, actually, because I can give my opinion from the perspective of they had 3 kids. She was very much struggling. He was still going to New York all the time on business. He was in running marathons and all this sort of stuff. Okay. And my personal opinion is if your wife is struggling that badly, you don't get to go on fucking trips to marathons, and you know what I mean? Yeah. You cancel business trips. But going back again, everyone seemed to acknowledge she wasn't doing well, but no one seemed to think she was going to be a true danger. So then again, well, why wouldn't you go on a work trip? Or, you know, like they did independently check his movement. So obviously they asked him questions about what he did that day. Then they went on to investigate themselves. They went to the CVS where Patrick stopped to buy the kids medication. He went to a 3V, which is a restaurant where he picked up dinner. They obtained all the surveillance footage from those locations. There's some suspicious stuff about that too. You can look into that as well. Certain things like he had changed his outfits.
Yeah, and he also, like, he sat in his car for 15 minutes, which honestly, if you're an overwhelmed parent who's struggling, you're probably going to do that.
Totally.
That's fair.
There was some dispute, like, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was like, oh, the drive to CVS was 3 minutes away. So if you took 3 minutes to drive there, we see you on the cameras spending however much time you spent in there, and then you went to 3V to get food, and that was so many minutes away, and then you said that you came straight home after that, but it took you 15 minutes.
Yes.
So what happened there? And so that's also been disputed. But again, that part is not on trial. It's neither here nor there for this. The whole thing about Patrick leaving the house is the big thing, because that's what prosecution is saying, that she used him to get him out of the house, which indicates that she's mentally stable enough to make a decision like that. The pure speculation question is he involved? But there is no evidence.
Yeah.
That's just simply the fact of the matter
Mhm.
here. We can speculate and conjecture all day long. And yeah, there's some hella suspicious things, but as it's rested, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, as of right now, we are waiting for Monday or Tuesday to see how the defense completely rests with their final witness testimony. And then it's on to the jury, I'm afraid.
I'm very curious. We will do an update episode.
Yes, absolutely.
Once we know everything. This is kind of unfolded in a way where we wanted to cover it sooner rather than later.
Yes, and again, you guys have heard me blab on for however long now. So much information.
Yeah.
And I didn't even include the nitty-gritty of it because A, pretty horrific to talk about, but B, we just don't have time today.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm left with so many questions. The thing that I kind of keep falling back on is the heart rate, the body temperature of her. I'm very confused about that, and I hope that kind of stuff gets cleared up eventually. But I have a feeling it won't.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave with one last dig, I will say, at Patrick before we completely end here today, is that he remarried very, very quickly.
I saw that.
Very quickly. I think within the year. And we all grieve in different ways.
Yeah.
How you move on is an individual thing. But for a man whose children were murdered and whose wife did it and is now paralyzed, you moved on very quickly, my man.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
I'm trying so hard not to judge, but
there's also things like Patrick was on holiday in Costa Rica previously. People have dug up social media photos who now see his current wife in those photos. That's from before any of this happened.
Really?
Yep. They're saying that
God.
the...
In Costa Rica without Lindsay?
Correct. Yeah. Yes, exactly. They're saying that the apartment that he owns in New York is owned by, or was initially sold to him by, his new wife's father. There's certain things how he has been, I mentioned he runs marathons. And there's a photo of him, I believe, and again, don't quote me on this, where the DA is in the photo next to him, like 2 people away in the same group photo. Again, just food for thought.
I'm avoiding saying so much right now.
I know. It's so tough not to.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
I think everyone listening is probably thinking the same things as me.
Yeah.
So we can think it together.
This is a safe place.
Yeah. It's, I can see why so much negative attention is falling on him.
Yeah. And it's tough because when you are involved in something like this, and I don't say involved in the sense that he did it or whatever, you're just a part of this. It's going to be very hard on everyone involved. As a personal anecdote, one of the teachers that taught me in high school, she ended up leaving the high school and moving to a different city and teaching in a different city. She was murdered, and they have never found out who murdered her. And people were not kind to her husband. It just is what it is. It's unfortunate, especially if truly the husband has nothing to do with it. It's just incredibly sad and tragic all around. If he did have something to do with it, then holy shit, how much worse that is.
Yeah.
But it's already unfathomably sad. So, you know, yeah. So anyway, that's the catch up with the Lindsay Clancy case. I'll try and keep you guys informed on how things go Monday, Tuesday, and into the jury deliberation. Hopefully I can have a little bit of a update for you guys, maybe next Extra Credit.
Okay.
But however long this takes, however many months or even years it takes to get to what is going to happen to Lindsay, whether she's going to be in prison for the rest of her life or whether she's going to be in a mental state facility for the rest of her life, we will have to wait to find out for that.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
Yeah. We have big thoughts. Let us know your big thoughts. Please. There's a lot of discussion. We want to be a part of it. let us know. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, here we are at the end of the episode.
Dang.
Hot damn. Before we go today, we just do a little bit of housekeeping. So we want to give a big shout out to all the wonderful listeners and supporters of us across the World Wide Web. And of course, we have a Patreon. So if you have been listening for a long time or a little time, and you are wondering, hey, I kind of like these ladies.
Yeah.
How else can I support them? Or where else can I see their content? Patreon's the place for that. Or grimcurriculum.com. Either way. We give a shout out to the wonderful folks on our Patreon every week, but by name, we name the Grim VIPs, which is the top tippity tier. A wonderful thank you to the Grim VIPs, who are the wonderful Mayhem Mudkip, Lisa, Nova, Kev Cords, Brian, Bob, Paranoid Pop Rocks, Steven Centauri, Judy, and Atlantean Jedi.
Thank you. We also have a free tier where you can get early episode reveals and see our Twitch VODs.
Mm-hmm.
Our paid tiers include access to video versions of all of the episodes, a Discord, and all sorts of other fun content. So check that out. Like we said, it's a great way to support the show. You can also support us by interacting with our social media stuff, sharing our pages. All of that stuff really, really does help us grow and introduce new people to the Grim Curriculum.
Heck yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. This has been the Grim Curriculum.